to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
As usual, the first item on the agenda are board comments and committee updates. Are there any board comments? We have a few reminders, but I can wait on those.
Our policy meeting, as we said, occurred in January, was canceled due to weather. And then we got the Seacoast Science and Technology board meeting this week. There's really a big report, right? The biggest thing that impacted us is that there is a big discussion around agreeing to the school agreement. That would, with all the schools that could change some legislation that required it every 4 years, 3 years, and that there was a push to do it quickly, but now there's kind of a need of making the breaks because the rules have been written. Most of the rules have been written, get that back up to date. That's the biggest thing.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? Just a couple of reminders. There are 2 school terms open. Tomorrow's the last day to file, and the town clerk's office will be open from 3 to 5 p.m. Deliberative session is this Saturday, 9 a.m. The Meadows High School cafetorium, followed immediately.
It's in the auditorium.
Wait.
It's downstairs. It's
Excuse me,
downstairs.
correction.
Yep.
It is the town hall on the bottom floor, and the town deliberative session will follow immediately after that at 10 a.m. And elections are on March 14th at 7 to 7. That's it. Next up, Lola, do you have a student representative report?
I do. The National Honor Society and the Interact Club are running a supply donation drive for the New Hampshire Mutual Aid and Relief Fund throughout February and March. They're looking for hygiene products, camping supplies, and non-perishable snack foods. Drop boxes will be located at the high school lobby, the elementary school lobby, and the town library. And there will be a community drop-off day at the high school from 1 to 4 on February 18th. The Newmarket Drama Club would like to cordially invite the Newmarket community to this year's winter production, She Kills Monsters. Show dates are 7 p.m. on Friday the 17th and 7 p.m. on Friday the 18th, and then noon on the 19th. Tickets are $10. As our winter track season comes to an end, big congratulations to our girls varsity 4x4 and 4x160 relay teams for setting new school records, and a big congratulations to junior Alana Hagan for qualifying for the nationals. Wishing all of our runners good luck at their final qualifying meet this Saturday. Congratulations to our girls varsity basketball team who won their most recent game against PCA. Their next game, which doubles as their senior night, is 7 o'clock tomorrow at home. And our boys varsity basketball team also has a game and their senior night celebration at home tomorrow at 5:30. Finally, congratulations to our boys swim relay team who made it to states.
Wow. Fantastic.
Thank you so much. Next up, we have a superintendent report.
Thank you. I'll be brief because we have a couple of other discussion topics you'll hear from me about in more detail later on. I did want to just mention I had the pleasure of going to the elementary school music concert last night. It was wonderfully done. Morgan King, our new first-year music teacher, did a wonderful job preparing both the chorus and the band for performances, and I'm told the instrumental music side of the equation is just getting restarted after a hiatus for a few years during the pandemic, so it's wonderful to see kids getting back involved in musical instruments. Just to kind of connect that before the holidays, I did go to the junior senior high program, and you really get a sense of the continuum of development of our performers over the course of their time in Newmarket. And it's a really wonderful program. We have 3 really young, energetic educators that are, I think they're ready to thinking about the future of our program, what we can do to really, get things going. But I did want to commend Morgan King for her work last night, and of course Brett Branscombe and Allison Tessier, who were the high school music instructors that put on the concert before the holidays. Great concerts, and I think it speaks well of the program we offer. Kind of moving along, before we came in, I did hand out a flip chart to everybody. Really, this is for your reference tomorrow. Remember, at 4 o'clock at the high school, we have a security walkthrough over there. This is a document that the Andy Corman and the the high school staff have been working on from a standpoint of emergency preparedness. It's basically taking what is a very detailed emergency plan, which is lots and lots of pages long, and turning it into a fairly quick reference document that a teacher or an adult can access in those situations and kind of know in a quick reference way how to handle if it's an evacuation or if it's a shelter in place or whatever. So it's, again, quick reference document that the staff has trained on repeatedly over the course of the year. But I'm told that these are hot off the presses and that the one you have in front of you is a paper copy. They will be laminated and teachers will have them easily accessible in their classrooms very shortly. So anyways, I'm looking forward to that. So tomorrow afternoon, just be ready for that walkthrough. And if you have questions, Dave Riley and Andy Corman will be there to answer all of your questions. I did also want to mention on the same subject of emergency preparedness that over the weekend, the Newmarket PD, fire, and regional SWAT teams and so forth used the Newmarket Elementary School for a training activity on Sunday. I had a chance to talk with Lieutenant Kukish and as well as Chief Jordan. It sounded like it was a very really helpful event. Allowed them to go through some scenarios and make sure they understood your response. And actually, we've had a number of conversations since then about things that we can do to collaborate better to make things work better. It also led us to conversations of setting up a what we call a tabletop exercise this summer with the local police and fire because when you train in isolation, it helps to bring everybody who's going to be involved in something together in a situation to say, here's the situation, let's talk through how we would handle it and try to resolve as many of the issues as we can. Hopefully we never have to use any of these procedures, but it's always helpful to do that. And once again, I just want to throw out my commendations to our local police and fire for their commitment to this stuff. It's great to see. Last thing I wanted to mention is, one of those kind of things, but it's going to be cold tomorrow, and naturally, we've had an unseasonably warm winter, so I think now that it's going to be cold, people are kind of in a panic, like, oh my goodness, what does this mean? Well, I grew up in New England, so cold means you wear a jacket. That being said, it is going to be abnormally cold in the morning, so I just want to, emails went out through both principals to the community, just reminding parents, please make sure, if your kid's going out to the bus stop, that they're dressed appropriately. If any parent in the community wants to drive their kid to school because they don't want them at the bus stop, well, that's fine. You can drop them off. Both schools will be open a few minutes early if you need to drop kids off early just to prevent them having to be outside. The other thing, we will not be having any outdoor activities tomorrow, so nobody will be outside. So as the day progresses, it's supposed to get progressively colder, and so everybody will be well cared for. And the one thing that I can't control for is if the buses will start in the morning. So clearly that is one of those things that has to be a game time decision, but our bus company will be coming in an hour early to make sure the buses start, and they will let me know if the buses aren't starting. And if that is the case, you might hear from me. I hope that's not going to happen. I think they'll be able to get them all started. Saturday morning, if we had to start the buses, I think it might be more of an issue because it's supposed to be like 40 below zero wind chill by Saturday morning. So anyway, enough said on cold weather, but that's where we are.
Maybe we can all go over tomorrow morning with a water bottle and grab a bus.
Yeah, that'd be great. That'd be good.
Trying to get warmed up.
Anyway, that's all I have.
I just want to thank you for showing up at all the school events. Community members have stopped me, so they noticed that there's administration there and cheering people on, so thank you for that.
Well, thank you. It's fun.
Oh, speaking of that, and I should have mentioned this in board comments, thanks to everyone here and everyone in the schools who helped with the vision of graduate night we had the other night. It was fantastic turnout. Great pizza by Fresh City, so that was cool too. And
Fresh Picks.
Fresh Pecks, excuse me. And yeah, it was a fantastic night. A lot of great ideas generated, some surprising ones. So
Yeah.
it was really interesting. So thanks everyone. Anyone else have any comments? No. Moving right on. All right, Amy, we have school board goals.
So in the summer at our board retreat, someone came up with this idea. Who was that? is just coming from me, my ideas, but in the end, we'll obviously all agree on that. So the first one is suggested process for determining the policies and practices we'd like to address. Number 2, have board members, superintendent participate in an open-ended survey consisting of 10 questions, which I have attached to this. 3, collect, examine, and share data. And this is a time frame. I put a time frame on this as well. So the board questionnaire and superintendent, I'm going to have you guys fill it out in the next couple weeks. I have March 16th as a due date for that. Then in April, I'll collect, examine, and share the data. And also in the second meeting of April, we'll all agree to a list of items we're interested in working on. Number 5, the school board, we will divide the items up and members come back with suggested improvements. That time will be determined at a later date. Number 6, we'll establish a time frame to review areas of improvement and new processes. And then 7, the board votes on revisions of current policies and practices. So with each with each suggestion I mentioned, there's 9 of them. First one, develop more effective policies and practices. I mentioned that currently the policy committee does meet monthly. We started a process with that where the first meeting we review it, correct? Review a policy that you guys have looked at, and then the second meeting we do a second read on that. So it's kind of currently in the process of changing the ways we develop more effective policies. Number 2, onboarding of new members. Number 3, engage in school board assessments. I haven't done one since my first term, and obviously it's only been a year, but I haven't, I've never done one. So I think maybe that's something we could address. 4, our school board goals. 5, this is something I would really love to do, is establish an annual agenda item, like a schedule of all our items that we review annually. So something not only do we have as current members, but new members can see as well. Number 6, we've talked about this already. We can drop this, but I know some people are happy with the 5 o'clock meeting time, but we could reevaluate that as well if we wanted to move it. What'd you say?
Maybe 5 o'clock.
5 is hard.
5:01. Number 7, I think we've done this already, moving the public comment to later in meetings so community members can be heard. We can reevaluate that. I mean, we did move it into the middle of the agenda, but we could still look at that. Number 8 is process of sealing non-public minutes. And number 9 is continuous student improvement assessment. So with each area of attention I suggested, I developed questions pertaining to each area. So those are the questions that I'd like you guys to answer. There's 10 questions in total. And then number 10 is just a general question. So that's it. That's what I have so far. Does anyone have any questions?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for all this work.
Thank you.
Is there a timeline by which you want these back?
For the questions to be answered, March 16th. Yeah.
The-
And you can just go online and cut and paste. I didn't make copies for everyone, so.
I'm looking at the questions.
Sure.
Also, thank you.
You're welcome.
You say school board when you say school board self-assessment, can you speak more to that?
Well, in our policy, we have those. Have you guys seen them by chance? Have you reviewed them? We used to,
Yeah,
it used to be
that
done.
was
Yeah,
struck recently, wasn't it? Is it still in the policy?
I honestly, I can't speak to whether it's still there or not, but I mean, certainly the process of annually reviewing board performance for yourself, a self-assessment
Right.
is a common practice to determine are you
Right.
achieving the things you set out to do, that kind of
Yeah.
thing. Yeah.
It just examines like how we're performing, like, I'm sure there's, everyone here could improve on something, or, so for me, it would help me personally, but I don't know, like, that's why this is just an idea at this point, we all can discuss, at a later date.
I just want to make sure I was answering the question appropriately.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
One of the things I know, Amy, you and I chatted a little bit about was the idea of, and I think that your concept of developing a calendar of things is trying to get into a cycle of things.
Right.
Because one of the things that happened this year, through nobody's fault, is there was a lot of things that happened in that window where probably would have been the time the board was establishing some of its policies, procedures, setting goals and all that kind of stuff. And with my coming on board and changes in the administration, it was more like August when we finally actually got to that place. Ideally, when the new board is seated in March, there's an immediate sort of cycle of, okay, what are the things we need to do to train the new board to know what it is that they need to do, establish goals, and then maybe your goals don't necessarily cycle the same way as a school year does. They cycle as a board cycle goes. So it's a continuous thing, and so it's not so, I know, it doesn't require, like for example, if you know you're doing a lot of things in the fall around budget, that's not a time where you want to plan to do anything else, because that's going to be the meat of your work from probably August through November. So it's that kind of conversation. But the idea of getting into an efficient cycle where you know what's expected, and you could actually, when the board is seated, just hand out, here's the flow of the year.
Right.
And I think that kind of helps everybody understand where things are coming from.
Definitely.
Actually, I did want to mention to that end, I have created a folder with a rough calendar of events, as well as some onboarding materials used for new members. Right now, I've shared that with Todd and the vice chair. I just want to make sure there's some continuity going forward as chairs change. That being said, it is public. It should be public to everyone. So we should consider maybe having a public board folder where we put materials like that.
I think it's a great idea.
I just did that obviously because of potential for right to know issues, so I just didn't want to share it with the entire board. Anything else? Any other thoughts, questions? No, it's fantastic, Amy. Thank you so much. I put a lot of work and thought into this, so it's
Thank you.
all right. Next up, Pat Wands is going to be talking to us about the induction through mentoring program. I actually practiced that at home 4 times.
Good evening, everyone. Before I speak to the induction through mentoring, I just want to give a little update. The last time I was here, I shared data from our NWEA assessment. So I didn't want you to think that I forgot about that, because I did say I would be coming back. So with the few snow days that we had and some absences, both schools have completed all of that. So 2 weeks, the next board meeting, I will come back and present that data to you. Okay. So I wanted to just share with you, actually it's about induction through mentoring, but also about a state leadership team that I've been serving on the last 5 years. So the CEDAR Center, CEEDAR, it stands for the Collaboration for Effective Educator Development, Accountability, and Reform Center. So it is basically a technical assistance center, and is designed to help states, institutes of higher education, so for example, all of our local universities, our state university system, and local education agencies, LEAs such as us, create coherent professional learning systems that provide opportunities to learn for teachers and leaders. The center's primary objective is to really partner with states around the country to provide these opportunities to learn for teachers and leaders. So New Hampshire is a CEDAR partner. But the state of New Hampshire, they didn't want to be called CEDAR, so they like to rebrand. So the rebranded name is NESS, or New Hampshire Educator Effectiveness for Student Success, so NHEESS. So I have served on this New Hampshire State Leadership Team for the past 5 years. as a local district representative. So first I was serving in the role as a school principal, and now I serve in the role as a director of curriculum. And I serve with colleagues around the state, including our state university system. So we have representatives, and they refer to them as IHEs. I've learned so many acronyms. So IHE is Institute for Higher Education. PPE is our prep programs for educators. Anyway, so we have representatives from Keene State, from UNH, from Southern New Hampshire University, St. Anselm's College. In fact, we meet twice a year at St. Anselm's College. So one of the goals that this state team is working on is an induction through mentoring program. So what you need to know is that the state of New Hampshire developed a mentoring program probably well over 10 years ago, and they did develop a toolkit, and they shared it throughout school districts in the state, and many school districts really modeled their programs from the state toolkit. However, today, we find ourselves needing current mentoring resources to share with school leaders and teachers that are aligned to research-based evidence to support educators. We also acknowledge how the pandemic has impacted educators across the country, particularly our educators who are new to teaching. What we know is that our research is suggesting that mentoring programs offer educators much-needed relief from professional and environmental stressors, in addition to the professional development. So educators need professional, safe, and supportive spaces for mentoring and reflection that are non-restrictive. Each year, CEDAR, they organize a national convening, a conference, and all of the state partners are invited, and they're actually expected to present their work that is aligned to the CEDAR goals. So this year, the convening is in San Francisco, and I've been asked by the NEST, by the New Hampshire team, to present our work to date on our induction and mentoring program that's currently being developed in New Hampshire. So there's about 8 to 10 of us representing New Hampshire that are attending the conference, but I am the only one that will be presenting for the state of New Hampshire. So I'm really excited that I get to attend this conference and really represent New Hampshire and the work that we've been doing on developing and creating an induction and mentoring program and toolkit. And I'm excited. What the CEDAR Center does at the convening is partner each state with another state to not just make connections, but also to learn from each other. So this year, New Hampshire has been partnered with the state of Mississippi, and I've been meeting 2 times now over Zoom with Lisa White, who's a professor at one of the universities in Mississippi, and who has been instrumental in developing Mississippi's toolkit for induction through mentoring. So the most exciting part is that as educators, when we attend this convening, we get to talk to people from all over the country. I've heard great things from Colorado and Utah, actually, on their mentoring program. So we're all about, what we make, we take as well, and we share. So I'm just so excited to learn from colleagues around the country who's as passionate in this work and mentoring teachers as I am. And certainly, I find it very impressive that Newmarket does have an induction through mentoring program, and I feel like what's so special about Newmarket is that it's a 4-year program. In a previous district where I was, it was a 1-year mentoring program. But to have a 4-year program, I feel like, especially in light of the pandemic, it is needed and warranted. And so the work that I've been doing with the state leadership team, I'm revamping and reshaping the induction through mentoring program here in Newmarket. And so as I learn, it's going to inform the work here for the town, or for our school district, but also right from today, I had a focus session group today with year 3-4 teachers at the middle and high school, and sharing some of the latest research and the work that I'm doing in resources. So I just wanted to share that and make sure that you're aware of this.
And Patty's presenting it in a very understated way. This is a big deal. It's like she's been selected to represent our state to make a presentation at a national conference, and it's something we should be very proud of. And it's also, clearly there is a mentoring program in existence that's been in place for a while, but I think Patty is going to bring some new life to it. I think I don't know how many, we have a very high percentage of teachers in this district that have been hired within the last 5 years that are still under the umbrella of this. At the junior senior high alone, about 60% of our staff are new within the last 5 years. So when you talk about mentoring, and it's not a small endeavor to do that. And so I think it's really exciting. And it does bring resources to our district that we otherwise wouldn't get because of Patty's willingness to serve on this Cedar group. And so it is a great thing for our district. So thank you for doing that, Patty.
May I just ask you a question? So with the mentoring program in Newmarket, I've seen that before, but where can we access that just to see what that involves actually?
Sure. Yeah, there's a whole mentoring and induction booklet. Actually, I can bring it to you. I'm curious if it is on our website. I'll have to look for that. Yeah, because it could certainly could be, so you can see that.
Yeah, I can get it for
Yeah.
the next meeting. You don't have to.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I can give you one.
And then I had another
Mhm.
question. You mentioned it? Most programs are 1 year.
Yeah.
We're 4 years.
4 years. Yeah.
Do you think these programs would attract more people because it's 4 years
That's
rather
what-
than 1?
I do. And that's what the research, and I have this little picture here. So here's the state of New Hampshire. So all of the green that you see are all of the districts that responded to our survey. So before we developed, we're going to go develop a toolkit, we surveyed several months ago superintendents, curriculum directors, special educator administrators, and teachers. And these are all of the districts, which we were so proud of to get such a response from around the state about mentoring through induction. So this is the data that I'm presenting at the conference. This data informed us of what is important in a mentoring and induction program. And so we actually created what we're calling pillars, 5 pillars plus 1, and our plus 1 is establishing trusting relationships that mentors, mentees, administrators, students, family, community have. That's necessary as a foundation in any mentor-mentee program. But the research is saying that when they were, actually I was just reading on Ed Week today actually too, that surveying teachers about what's important to them and that support system. So I think myself as a new teacher coming out to know that I can have 4 years of support is helpful than just 1 year. Yeah. Because it's showing like the resources, the time, and the commitment that the district is putting in to support new teachers.
And just on a very practical level too, the data shows that new teachers, if they're going to leave the profession, they're going to leave it within the first
5 years.
first 3 to 5 years.
Yeah. within the
So
first 5
that
years,
window is critically
Critical.
important to give people the kind of support they need, especially when I think we're getting more non-traditional educators
We are.
that come to us with an expertise, but may not have the background in
The
actual
pedagogy.
education, and so that it requires more support
Yep.
to help them be successful, and I think that's critical long term.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious. I'd like to know a little more about how we structure the mentorship program is. I mean, like, is it typically 1-to-1? Does each senior teacher have more than one mentee?
Yeah, no. So a mentor is assigned a mentee is assigned a mentor, and that mentor has gone through some type of training within the district. That's that piece I need to dig into more because they were already assigned prior to my coming on. But the mentor and the mentee, they keep a log, and they have to meet with each other so many times, and it's all within the roles and responsibilities of the mentor, the roles and responsibilities of the mentee. But it's also giving training to mentors, and so there's that whole component in a toolkit that I think we might be lacking here a little bit of that training piece for mentors, and updating. I shouldn't say updating. Maybe retooling. What we're looking at for instructional practices and pedagogical practices with content area. And there's also a lot of discussion about should the mentor be in the same content area as the mentee. And actually, Kathleen McCurdy, who's a professor at UNH, her dissertation was in 2016, and she did her whole dissertation is on mentoring through induction through mentoring program. And I asked her, she attended one of our state leadership meetings, and I said, "Oh, I'm so curious. do you have evidence or research to support that a mentor should be the same grade level or the same content area as a mentee? And she said, Patty, that's such a great question. No, I don't have any evidence either way. And the reason why I asked that question was, as a principal in the program that we had, we always gave surveys and feedback to our mentees, our new teachers, because we were curious. We wanted to know, do you like the fact that the mentor is in the same grade level as you or the same content area as you? And actually our survey responses said no, that the mentees felt, you know what, I'm with this teacher all day, we're in the same PLC, we're in the same meetings. I actually would love to be partnered with somebody maybe in a different grade level or in a different content area. Like, I could learn from that teacher too. So it really made us pause and reflect, and the following year we switched it up and we were matching mentors. So I was so curious with Kathleen's research if she had evidence to support either way, and she's like, I didn't ask, she didn't have that evidence yet. So I thought, okay, I'm going to dig into that more. I think it's good to think differently.
Yeah, I was just, curious what type of, what type of, it seems like it would be a fairly big commitment for the more senior teachers if you've got 60% of your staff that are
It is.
5 years or less.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, you're only assigned one mentor, and the fortunate piece of this as well, it is a stipend position as well, because it is another role. It's another responsibility for the mentor and the mentee. So, but one that's well worth it.
What are the 5 pillars?
The 5 pillars, I can tell you right now. I have them right here, just so that I don't miss one. So, like I talked to, the plus one is the relationship through trust, that we felt the importance of establishing trust through strong relationships. So the first pillar is educational strategies, which is your pedagogy. So what technique and strategies are used for accomplishing your goals and objectives. Pillar 2 is your content area, or your subject, your academic field. So that's your knowledge relative to your field or role. So your state standards, your competencies in that area. Pillar 3 are the professional standards, or your professional responsibilities, which are the expectations and more for your role. So like if you think of as educators, we're all responsible for adhering to the Code of Ethics and Code of Conduct, right, in the state of New Hampshire, and we sign that every year. Pillar 4 is a student social emotional learning regulation / discipline. So that's the mindsets and strategies for helping students to regulate themselves, but giving that to teachers to support students in the classroom. I find the 5th pillar to me is really exciting, and I think this is what has really shifted in mentoring programs that you wouldn't probably see before. And our pillar 5 is educator resilience and self-care. So there's strategies for self-care and nurturing resilience in yourself and in others. As a teacher, we're tired, right? We're tired at the end of the day, and in our classrooms we are making, how many decisions do we make in a split second? We're constantly making decisions. And it's funny, I was sharing with Todd earlier in my focus session group with the educators, we were talking about this pillar today, and I said, we know that there are students who push our buttons, right? And sometimes we don't have our best day, and we might not be on it, but what's nice is to have a resource in developing this toolkit where you can print it out, put it on a clipboard, leave it by the edge of your desk or table, that when you're in that moment that your buttons might be pushed, or it just might be getting a little unruly, that you can just quickly glance at something and just remind yourself, how am I going to respond in this situation? What's the best thing for me, and what's the best thing for my students? And that, I would say, would be lacking prior to that. Now we're looking at that, and as we should. So I'm excited to share more with you as we develop it. Yeah.
About that, and
Sure.
all the additional work that you've taken on, not only in the state level, but now your presentation. It's going to be a lot of extra work.
And that's next week, right?
It is, yes, it's next
Oh,
week.
funny.
Yeah, the presentation's done. Yeah, it was approved and done. And San Francisco. I know. Well, it's in the 50s. I put it on my weather. I'm like, but I'll take 50s over minus whatever. I'll take it. Well, thanks, everybody.
Great.
Thanks,
thank
Patty.
you. Would anyone mind if we move the fiscal year presentation up a bit so that Jana might be able to get out of here a little bit earlier tonight?
Not at all.
Jana? I know it's 5 minutes early. But.
Thank you.
Well, I've just decided that I'm going to San Francisco with Patty. I will be in her back. And wow, and she's a tough act to follow. So we are so lucky to have her with us here in this district. So quarter two financials, as you know, halfway through the year, it's kind of a little anticlimactic. We aren't really able to make predictions just yet, and we're really not far enough into the year to get those type of trends. But it's always good to get kind of a baseline assessment of where we are. Once again, the financials are presented to you in the format of a summary of the expenditures and the revenues. The same things that have been impacting us for the last couple years are still impacting our expenditures, but in different ways. We still are impacted by COVID, but now it's not an active involvement where we can't run programming and things like that. Now it's more of we're dealing with economic factors that everybody is seeing out in the world. Some volatility in pricing that, who hasn't seen the eggs lately? Just those kinds of things. It's not something that we haven't seen before. It's just that we kind of have to keep an eye on it and reallocate our resources as need be. The expenditures in our food service fund have also been kind of negatively impacted because food is one of the primary areas where we've seen a lot of inflation. I am pleased to report I haven't put the summary in here specifically relative to their expenditures and revenues. I get a report every month, but we are ahead of, in a positive way, ahead of where we had predicted we would be at this point in the year relative to, we usually expect to end the year with a negative balance, but we are not as deeply into that negative balance as we had predicted at this point. So they're doing a great job of managing and containing costs. They've also been doing a great job of expanding programming. We have a couple of exciting things that we're working on right now. As Gary mentioned, they catered our events, and we're looking to involve them more in that. We think that's a great way to reinvest right into the district because we're using our staff and our resources. They've also been very energetically supportive of looking for grant opportunities. So they're not huge dollar grants, but they are impactful. So, and I mentioned it a little further down, we applied together for a New England Dairy Council grant, and we have been approved to get a smoothie station so that we can provide those as breakfast and lunch options for students with milk and fruit and fresh fruits and things like that. So it's another option. I was lobbying hard to get the SAU office to try it out first, but I don't know that I won.
I'll have to go to the schools.
Yeah. Well, and then the other thing that we applied for, which I think is really exciting, we also applied for the National School Lunch Equipment Grant to get 2 industrial food processors because they would like to offer our students some exciting new food options such as homemade hummus and salsas and fresh made soups, and that will allow them to expand the offerings to students in that way too. So we have applied. They won't be making decisions till probably late March, early April on that, but we are optimistic that we will be recipients of those grants as well. So we really are doing some great work in the food service area thanks to our partnership with Fresh Picks. As far as revenues, again, we local revenues, this is the first year that we've had students pay for school lunch for a couple of years. So of course we're seeing an increase in revenues over what we saw last year, but we're also seeing a corresponding decrease in the federal revenues because meals are no longer being reimbursed as free meals. All in all, as I said, we do predict, and we have predicted that we will have come out with a negative fund balance at the end of the year. But if you recall, we had a positive fund balance at the end of fiscal year 22, and that fund balance would be used to offset any negatives. So it's likely we may not have to make a transfer from the general fund to cover any shortfall in food service this year, which is really good for the district. Another exciting grant opportunity, Dave Riley, he's fantastic. I don't need to tell any of you that, but he's worked really hard to pull together information so that we could apply together for the Renew America School Grant. It's a federal grant. $80 million has been given just to schools through the Department of Energy. there's a 3 or 4 part process. The first is you have to submit a project summary and a project mini scope, and that's a smaller document. It still required a lot of information. If you're approved past that first gauntlet, then you do the big whopping application. So what we have thrown on as our application is the remaining windows at NES, because if you remember, we tried for a different grant that fell through, the seed grant. But it falls in line with this new grant, and if we can benefit from that award, we would be able to continue that, finish up NES, get all those windows done, hopefully minimizing any impact on taxpayers. So there is a 5% contribution share rate, so we would have to come up with 5% from a capital reserve or from district funding, but the other 95% would come from the funding if we win. So I will certainly keep you abreast of that. The deadline has passed for applications. Now we're just waiting for people to review and get back to us and let us know if we've been selected to move to the next step. So that's pretty exciting for us too. I think the rest of it, I've presented the financials to you and I've given you kind of summaries. I won't go through each individual variance because there are some explanations of positives and negatives there for you. But I guess I'd open it up and just ask you if you have any questions for me or if there's anything was unclear.
So I'll just test my memory of how this works. Setting aside a few things like heating fuel, our expenses tend to be fairly ratable over the course of a year, whereas revenues are usually a bit front-loaded because of the general fund taxes coming in. Is that more or less correct?
We actually get, for our regular appropriation from the town, which includes our state ed tax, that comes monthly.
Okay.
So we get that throughout the year evenly. We book it as an expected revenue at the beginning, but we get a payment every month. It's usually divided into 12.
I mean, I guess where I'm headed with that, so there doesn't seem anything out of the ordinary to you that we, through mid-year, it looks like we've got about 60% of our revenue in, whereas the expenses seem to be more.
No, it's Newmarket is a great place. I have worked in other districts where this is not the case, but we never have to worry about our payment coming from the town on time, which some districts do have that, and I've worked in one that did. So no, we haven't had any cash flow issues. We haven't heard anything from the town that they're having any difficulty other than, normal variances with that.
And that wasn't exactly the question I was asking. So
Oh, sorry.
we're about 50% of the way spent on expenditures. We look like we're about 60% of the way there on revenues. Is that suggesting that we could end up better than we thought we would, or is that just the way timing typically
Yes,
works?
my apologies. I think yes, that is reflective that I think we will end up a little bit better in the revenues than we have predicted. I already know, if you recall, the FEMA projects, we aren't earning any of that revenue in this year. It was all in last year's expenditures, but the award hadn't come in, so we already have, you folks accepted unanticipated revenue from FEMA and from the SAFE grant. So that FEMA money is automatically money that we did not count in our revenues. So I think it was $131,000 roughly. So that's already a plus. We are on track with our special education aid. That has been significantly higher than we predicted when we put the budget together. And some of that variation has to do with the state looks at all the claims that come in, and then they will pay a percentage of those claims based on what they have set aside for special ed. So you can't always predict if you're going to get 100% of what you ask for, or 70% or 60%. But we got nearly all of the things Ms. McNeil and her team put together for this year. So that's another plus that was unanticipated. So we do have some things like that. We still have a lot of year left to go, and obviously things can change throughout the year. But at this time, I don't see a shortfall of revenues.
And then as I read this, there's one other chunk of revenue that's not reflected, but we know it's coming, and that's what we'll pull out of the capital reserve fund for the window project, correct?
It won't actually. The expenditures are going to look, when you look at them, they're higher than what they really are. But at the end of the year, you'll see it in the fund balance. You're still going to see higher expenditures, but you'll see an offsetting revenue that comes in from capital reserve.
Okay, thank you.
So really, as far as expenditures go, while it is about 5%, what's that exact number they're saying? The favorable, sorry, 1.1 million.
Some people have
About
mentioned,
1.1 million.
some people have mentioned it's been hard to hear.
Mumbler. So it's about 1.1 million favorable. It's actually even better than that because of that
Yeah.
2,000 for the windows that actually
Yeah.
offset by the capital.
Yeah. But again, we do have some things, and I've mentioned them on the front page. There are some things that are not reflected in here. For example, we can't encumber funds for people that we haven't hired yet, and we do have a lot of vacancies still in the budget that could be filled tomorrow, hopefully. But right now, that's part of what is leading into that balance is that we are halfway through the year, and we have had vacancies that were booked as supposedly expending for salaries. So.
You can't account for salary, future salaries in here if there's not a person in the position.
We budget for it, but if you're talking encumbering means you actually are locked up saying you're going to pay it. Yeah. So we can't encumber a salary until we have a person to attribute that to. We have budget for it, and we have a position, and I can tell, obviously that's part of what's showing in the 1.1 million is that those are positions, but as you've heard all year, we were down 18 paraprofessionals at one point, and that's 18.
Currently down 9.
We're currently down 9. We'll see that's improvement.
We're making
But
progress.
for a good portion of the year, we were down more than 9, and that's salaries that we're not expending at all, and it's not likely to be expended in the rest of the year. So that's probably because salaries and benefits are between 75 and 80% of our whole budget. So most of what you're seeing there is salaries and benefits related.
On the food service, that massive, like almost about 100% unfavorable variance in professional services just because everything's lumped into there because we're
Right. So when we budgeted last year, if you recall, we had our own internal food service at elementary school, and we had professional services just at the junior senior high, and that model shifted after the budget was set. So now we're not tapping any salary lines because we don't have our own employees there. It's all going to contracted services. The only other budget items we have plan to expend on within that area might be repairs and maintenance. Because the equipment is still ours and those types of things.
last question is, so I saw like revenues are like 60% for local and state, but federal is like at 24%. Is that just, we're still expecting those revenues, it's just because of the schedule by which they get distributed by the federal government?
Right. So the way we have to report the revenues to the state is the month closes, we file a report, and then we have to wait for reimbursement. So we are always, a couple months behind. Even though we've expended, we haven't received the money for probably 2 months.
And we're not concerned that the federal revenues will be lower than the budget?
No. We've allocated, especially for the title grants and the ESSER grants and things. That's a 1-for-1. Whatever you budget is what, and you expend is what you receive. So sometimes when we get to June, we have to carry a receivable balance because we haven't been paid yet from the state, but we've earned the revenue previously. The auditors help us with those adjustments, but by the end of the year, we should have a 100% match between what we expended and what we've received for revenues in the budget.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I did have a couple questions. Other state, is there any way we can do a 16% increase in revenues in other areas? And can you tell me what that increase is from?
So other state aid, there's 3 items that go into that, and I will have to bring back which 3 those are. One of them is differentiated special education aid, which is another component that was higher, and there are 2 others, but I don't want to misspeak.
Yeah, no,
They're
that's
just
fine.
small state things that we were not expecting to be as high as they were.
You can send an email or whatever. So
Yeah.
not that important. Overall, 20 is
Yeah.
small relative to the overall budget.
Yeah.
And the third, and I apologize because this is not related to the presentation directly, but you mentioned the
food processor.
Food processor, thank you. Neither one of those sounded proper.
Sounded like some
The
type
disposal
of, some
for
type of
the-
website
yeah.
you shouldn't be on.
Yeah. No, well, I don't have a food processor. So I cook them separately.
Yeah.
I wish I had a food processor. Yeah, I was just kind of struck and amazed by that, and by the meals we had the other day. Just Fresh Picks make a lot of the stuff that they serve on site.
They do a lot of scratch cooking.
Wow.
Ev-
That's great.
They really do. I mean, there are certain parameters within the program that they have to comply with in order to reimburse. But on the whole, what you saw at that salad bar, that's what our students see every day. Like they do a lot of fresh stuff. They do a lot of fresh fruit. Um, they just do a great job with the presentations of the meals, and all the more amazing because they're held to a certain sodium content, which I can't tell you what it is, but they're held to certain parameters within the meals. But everything looks appealing. You walk through the cafeteria and it's an appealing looking meal. It's good for the most people eat with their eyes first. But they do a fantastic job with it.
Yeah, I know I think a lot of places around the country were getting to open box cooking there for a while, right?
Yeah.
Free eating, so that's fantastic to hear.
Yeah.
Great, thank you so much.
Yeah, I do, but I forgot to mention that, but I really do appreciate the clarification about the hummus and the salsa, because when you said industrial food processor, that conjured a slightly disturbing image.
Yeah, it's just the really, really strong ones.
Okay,
Big
good,
quantities.
Good.
One final thing I wanted to mention before I go, we're probably going to talk a little bit more about it, and you're aware because we've talked about it before, but we are in the process of spinning up our migration to our new financial software. And we were talking about grants, and while it's not reflected in here, it actually is being funded in great part by two things. One, we're tapping ESSER funds so that there'll be no impact on our budget. But the second thing is we've negotiated with them to get them to compensate us for the cost of the implementation specialists, because they sold us a product in 2016 with a promise that it was going to be expanded and address and meet the district's need, and then they realized they could not do that. So when we needed to make this move, we negotiated with them and said, well, you sold us something you never delivered on, so they are comping probably $40,000 worth of professional services for that. So, and I just wanted to say we had a meeting as a group. We're really trying to be methodical and plan this out and involve everybody and bring people in as we make decisions about what we're doing and how we're going to implement things. And the folks that we met with, we had a week this week, were incredibly supportive. We've got some great people here, and it's going to be a little extra work, but we all are really looking forward to the end result. We think it's going to really benefit the district. We're going to be able to provide information much easier than we can now. It'll come out of the system much cleaner. So right now we do a lot of manual massaging to give you what you see, but we all are going to be able to be more granular in our budgeting, more precise in our reporting. So we think it's going to be a really good fit for the district.
And I do want to take a moment to just commend Jana has done a tremendous amount of background work to get this software upgrade in motion. And as she noted, it's going to be a lot of work, but a lot of the work is going to come out of Jana's office, and she's willingly taking that on. But one of the things I'm very excited about, I don't normally say this, I'm looking forward to next budget season because it will be the ability for us to be able to share information and look at things in like as Jana said, in a more granular way. I mean, simple things like being able to track like what's been spent by the English department in the supply line historically, so we can actually have conversations about, okay, is that necessary? It's just some really good stuff, and to see the faces on the women at the two schools that do the bookkeeping, they were both thrilled. And finally, we don't have to have what is, it can only be described as an archaic process. We have a lot of redundant paper processes that just require multiple people to touch paper, and is, quite frankly, more likely to be errors made in it, because the more people that take a piece of paper and transcribe it someplace else, the more likely there are to be things. So we're really at a good place here, and we're really thrilled. And Jana did a lot of creative thinking around how we can figure out a way to fund this so that it had virtually
Like
no
tax
impact on
Yeah,
the
that
local
was
taxes.
that was the
But it will pay tremendous dividends to us as a system in our efficiency in being able to manage things. And frankly, it will make it easier so that, for example, if I have a request for some financial information that I need right now, I really have to go to Jana and say, Jana, can you pull this information? And but this new system, once I'm up to speed on it, will really be possible for me to be able to access information a lot
Maybe your
easier.
biggest challenge.
Actually, it's probably Jana's biggest challenge would be training me, but anyway, I do thank you for all the work you've
You're
done on it,
welcome.
Jana.
But I'm excited, and just wanted to kind of preface it to with the positive with for the couple years. Of course, you're not going to be able to see real super clean trends because we're going from one.
That's what I was going to ask you. So long term, we're going to have much better tracking. Historic, are we going to lose a lot of historic?
You're not going to
or
lose
not
it.
data, but ability to trend it.
Right, you're not going to lose it. So one of the exciting things that we're doing that the ladies are so excited about is right now, for example, in supplies at the elementary school and at the middle and the high, we just have one giant bucket called supplies. But there actually is a 2-digit sequence that most schools have. What's called the subject code. So you can say these are English supplies, these are math supplies, these are science supplies, these are this. We don't have that. So what you're going to see when we budget is you're just going to see a huge general supply number, but then you're going to see a whole bunch of negatives in the subject matter supplies because basically we're taking that budget that we allocated in one code and we're spreading it across others. So for a couple of years it's going to look a little strange, but we'll be able to explain it. We'll be able to track it. The system has the ability, they call it an alias. So I can take the original code that I have now and assign it to the new code so that I can tell you, well, what you're seeing here, it used to be reflected there. But I still should be able to, what you see in this financial report, the goal is regardless of what our sub-accounts say and our small accounts say, you're still going to see supplies, you're still going to be salaries, you're still going to see benefits. So this information at this level will still be pretty consistent.
Sorry, one more thing that I forgot. This actually hit my. If the executive and branch in Congress can't come to an agreement on the debt ceiling and the federal government goes into shutdown mode, is there any risk in terms of the revenues we're expecting?
I would say other than the fact that there wouldn't be people to process the claims and people to do those things, I don't think there's a risk of the funding going away. It may be hard to get to. I'm hoping not. The bigger thing is probably the state level. There's a bunch of bills that I'm tracking right now, one of which is they're looking to memorialize that 7.5% New Hampshire retirement going forward, which would be great because part of what our tax impact was this year that we calculated said that wasn't going to happen. So that automatically would be a win. So some of the windfalls of the politics really do filter down, but as far as the funding materializing or the revenues materializing, I don't think we're at risk of those not happening. They just might not happen as quickly as we might like.
And they aren't exactly lightning fast now.
No, I would not categorize them in the lightning area.
Before we do it, Patty, I want to say thank you guys for attending the graduate.
Oh, yeah.
The community members were asking me like who was who and who was those were there, and especially like you and Dave that may not have as a forward facing position where you're dealing with teachers and students. I just really appreciate you guys were there.
Yeah,
I hope the number of times that personal finance showed up the most.
it made my heart sing every time. But no, that we wouldn't have missed it for the world. We thought it was a great event. The feedback, you mentioned it, I couldn't believe how wonderful and positive, and it was just a great night. I'm looking forward to the next one.
That's
Before
right.
you go, I just wanted to again say thank you. The amount of money you personally have saved the district by your tenacity and your negotiating skills is in the hundreds of thousands. And you're in a position where anybody could easily say, I think I charge you $40,000, what do I care? It's not my money, right?
Yeah.
And the fact that you do that for us is just phenomenal. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you. I do think of it like my money then. So that's why I fight so hard
Boy,
for
you're
it.
rich.
Then we all go with
There's a
Pat.
job for her
We all go.
somewhere after she wants it.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
All right, next we're going to loop back to the superintendent
discussion, what kind of came out of it was going to be basically what was going to guide what we're going to recommend to the board. What we really came down to was, first off, with the evaluation, when Todd was hired, basically, he was tasked with basically two goals, hire the positions that were vacant, and just like basically keep the lights on, and pay the bills, and just kind of right the ship. And then he also kind of took on himself, kind of starting to reach out to the community and start to build trust there. So because we really didn't necessarily set any specific goals, I personally found it hard to say this is what the evaluation should specifically be. So it kind of left us with what is in the policy that we looked at last time we met. So and the other thing that kind of came to is that basically there's two jobs here. The first one is determining what we're going to do here in the coming year, and then also future evaluations. So first off, what we're going to determine, or what we were going to recommend to determine our immediate future was that we would use the existing policy to kind of do a evaluation of Todd's performance this year. And it would just be kind of open answer and comments, and then us board will come together in a non-public meeting to compile one together that we would then share with Todd, and then Todd would do a self-evaluation based on those same principles. My hope is that we can do that before we convene as a board before the election, which is not a whole lot of turnaround time, so we do need to have a honest discussion about that. And then, based on those parameters of the evaluation, we can then determine to go forward. And then we thought with the going forward that we would have a committee of different stakeholders, so like board members, teachers, um, um, parents, thank you, members of the public, and then we would use that committee to then kind of determine whether or not to recommend hiring Todd for the next 3 years or whatever. So yeah, I'm gonna stop there. Is that clear? Sorry about my honest.
So,
No.
can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So, can I ask a question about the timeline? Or?
Either one, yeah.
So, are we saying the recommendation is June?
So that is what I have. I will tell you, I think we said that by August we make a determination.
Correct.
Personally, as I would like to have it by the end of the school year, because I have a feeling like that Todd has some visions that he wants to do, and that needs to be done before the next school year. And if he knows that he's going to be offered a position or permanent, he's going to have more of a mandate to do those changes. And that's what my thinking was.
My question is more, and I know it's going to be hard for you, otherwise, that's sooner now.
Okay. I would love to do it earlier.
Yeah, and I think what we discussed was, the short-term process being, that I can at any point take the policy that has the 10 areas and I can do a narrative self-reflection of what I've been focusing on, kind of give you guys a sense of where I see the successes and where things went, give that to you as a starting point, and then you can use that in addition to any other information that you choose to collect, whether you choose to survey the community, whatever it is you choose to do to solicit information. And then I think that the detail you need to sit down together as a board to write the evaluation will be in your hands fairly quickly, I would think. It's just a question of the timeline. Do you want to try to wrap it up by June? Certainly my contract says in August. That's when we make a decision as to what happens next.
I will tell you that as I really sat down thinking about this, Amy and I both did a lot of research, that what I saw, we originally said the superintendent evaluation, but really what we need first decide is what vision and direction do we want for the district, and is Todd's vision aligned with ours?
policy.
And like, just setting aside the R of the term policy, which was overly broad, so ignorant questions.
Yeah, like our thought was we would just use what's in that policy, so that it would be on page 3 of our packet, those 10 things, that basically we would use to kind of guide, basically bullet points when we came together as a board, and then Todd would use as a self-evaluation.
And actually, just as an additional point, we did look at 2 or 3 other school districts' policies around it, and these 10 domains, if you will, are pretty typical. The wording is different, but this is not unusual. I think these are. I don't think anybody in a superintendency role would question that all 10 of these things play a role. I think the thing why I think the value of a self-reflection is important is you can't do all 10 things all the time, and so it's like a matter of, as Andrew said, it's a matter of priorities. And so it's like, what are the priorities, and how do we do on those? And then broadly, all the other functions are going to happen on a daily basis anyway. It's just a question of what do you focus on from an evaluative purpose.
I like that. Sorry, let me hold on to this comment for a bit while we're.
So I'll say there was kind of a discussion about a 360 at some point. That's why I know that kind of like the one's not necessarily recommended here. And personally, I will tell you that I haven't necessarily experienced a good one that's been used well, and I don't think this is the time to really try one out because of what's riding on it, as well as Todd commented, he hasn't had a chance to really reach out to every single stakeholder. There is a comment there on that part about the process about potentially a survey going out to stakeholders. If that happens, what I think is Todd and the board needs to sit down and talk about what those questions are going to be and their purpose behind them. And I really think it needs to be more about what the vision is for the school. And I think really the question we answered with this when it comes to like our relationship is, do those 2 things match up with what the community wants for the future and Todd and them.
I was the one who brought up 360 several times, and the reason I did was not that I think we should do 360, because I don't think it makes sense in this case, given a lot of the factors we've already articulated. But in that, I didn't want us to do what we did before. I wanted something heading in the direction of the 360, and I think a committee of stakeholders from the community and the school and getting them involved in the process does that. Maybe not as comprehensively as we may like in the future, but I think it's important to get that input of people beyond the board. Yeah. And that's really why I kept pushing towards that idea as opposed to that definitive process.
Yeah. And the thing too, I think with the committee that we need to be really careful about is when we choose parents, members of the public, that's new faces, because there's one complaint that seems like it's always the same people. So I think as a board we can kind of determine what the criteria will be when we choose.
If you're listening and you said that, make sure you volunteer.
It's like only 30 people that volunteer for the town, right?
Exactly.
It's just like
Exactly.
community.
That's the reality.
But yeah, totally.
Yeah. But I will tell you, the number of people that show up at that vision, the graduate thing, got to be really exciting.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I think,
I think this is great. I said one other question. Can you, and I'm sorry if you already said it, can you expand on the narrative you're thinking about that the board is going to do in February? And do you think that's enough time?
So in February, that would be where we would create, basically, we would use those different criteria in the policy to create basically an evaluation for Todd, and then Todd would do his self-evaluation. The only reason I did that is that we potentially only have one more meeting that the 5 of us are meeting together, and I think we're the best situated to do that evaluation as opposed to having 3 board members.
I completely agree.
Board.
It is tight.
Yeah. And even if that means potentially adding a meeting just for that in the first week of March, I personally think it's important that we do that before we have the board. But I think also we need to have realism about our schedules as well as what's on Todd's plate too. Maybe we don't do all 10, or maybe we ask Todd to only do a few, like 6 or 7 of them for the self-evaluation. Or
Yeah, Because if we're going to create that, I'm sorry, if we were going to create that and then give it to Todd, it does. I mean, I suppose he doesn't actually have to return it prior to the election. He can return it in April,
Right.
for that matter. So never mind. Let me return
Right.
that.
Yeah. I mean, I personally, I don't have a concern about having, you said to me, Todd, can you give a narrative that touches upon your efforts in all 10 of these? I can certainly give you feedback on all of them. Obviously, there are areas that if I wanted to hold things up as being areas of particular success or particular struggle, I would want to highlight those things. But I'm not concerned about being able to do it. In fact, when we talked, I think I said, you give me a couple of weeks, I can easily generate something from my perspective, and I think it's having you kind of simultaneously do that and then giving it to the committee to look at those two things together and determine what you want to put in the ultimate narrative. I think that's the way to go.
I also feel like, as you mentioned, right, that like, can't do 10 things well at once, right? So
Right.
maybe 3 at best that you know, really do well. That, so there's probably some places here where like stuff to be as robust in the conversation as the emphasis of the needs of the district this time. Like, I don't know if I can say anything about delivery of instruction does impact on that right now, right? Like, I don't think I have anything coherent to say based on.
But I can certainly tell you something, and you guys can say, well, have I observed that? Do I agree with that? You might have other avenues that you're collecting information to confirm what your feeling about that. I do think and this is where, and I'm sorry if I'm jumping ahead, but I think the ideal process, kind of going back to when we were talking about the board calendar, the evaluation process for the superintendent should kind of mirror that. So as the board is setting its goals, the superintendent is setting their goals, they're kind of in line with each other, then that's what you're being measured on. So it becomes you're not going to have 10 goals. You're probably going to have 3 or 4 or whatever goals, and that's the way it would work and kind of get into a cycle. And the idea of getting to a place where, if there's a community input component you want to build into the process, you just schedule it and it happens on an annual cycle, whether it's a survey, whether it's a community meeting, whatever it is, however you want to collect that information.
And that's kind of like where I wanted to make sure that we did that evaluation before the elections, so then we can jump right in and start this cycle. And then we are making a recommendation that we use the policy next year as well. Perhaps not doing all 10, but choosing the ones we really want to concentrate on. And then that way, at the end of next year, or even maybe halfway through, we really take a reflection, say, okay, what's working and what's not working with this? Because really, personally, based on my experience with evaluation should be about growth. And that's why I really want to stall on this, is about giving that feedback to the superintendent about, where does the district want to go, and showing growth, because really that's personally what I want as superintendent.
Yeah, I think personally, you kind of need both, right? You do want that growth factor. So then you have to look at the day to day. Are we getting a bunch of comments? Is the district running out of money? Have students been running around outside the school with their hairs on fire? Whatever.
Saw that?
I don't know. Are there bears around
Do we
the
have a
school?
problem with bears?
I haven't seen any of that, but
But there's like the balcony and the dance floor, right? Like at one level, yeah, but like I would agree that like the situation normal, strategic leader of the administrative leader of the district, not get done.
Sort of on that, maybe that's a good point to jump in with. I like basically everything I see here. I did have a question. That very last line of it, is that meant to be March of 24 or 25?
Yeah, March 2024.
Okay.
I think it was actually when I was maybe off.
Okay. But
I thought that was related to the contract.
yeah, that was why I was asking. The first bullet, though, I agree in principle. I mean, you can't make up the evaluation criteria after the year is over. That's not fair to anybody. But there is a big component of this job that has to do with crisis management. Ideally small crises, possibly larger, and I wouldn't want to disadvantage either side by making that out of bounds. Like if something comes up and Todd does a stellar job of managing it, I want him to be able to take credit for it if something comes up and we don't do a good job of managing it, we got to reflect that as well. So I just want to make sure that that stays broadly in bounds as a topic of conversation.
Yeah, and like I'll tell you too that like looking at those 10 components, there are some like there's I really don't see one where like community relationships.
Yeah, we didn't see
And
that.
just based on my time on the board, I really think the superintendent position, so much of that is just being the PR person.
Yep.
But that's not on here. So like maybe we wouldn't want to add that for this coming evaluation cycle in March. But I do think like at some point we do need to, after going through this one time, we do need to look and say, hey, where's this need to be tweaked? So I think that's definitely important.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that's a huge point.
Reflection in August or something about the process. When this particular set of criteria, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you both so much.
Yeah,
It's
thank
a ton
you.
of work and it's really well laid out. I like it.
I really enjoyed working with you. It's exciting. So moving forward, are we going to ask Todd for self-reflection on these by our next meeting, first week of March, and when are we going to do one as a board? I'm just saying that because I wanted to read.
Yeah, I don't know, it seems like we should give more time for the self-reflection, especially if we're creating a narrative that he's going to use towards that self-reflection at all. And whether that happens post-elections or not, I don't think is relevant. Because the discussion of those isn't going to happen until April or whatever. Was I misunderstanding?
But the evaluation's occurring before the election, correct?
Yeah, I think at some point, us five need to have something written down, right? Just what we've experienced in the past year.
Right.
I think probably we can attest to.
Yeah.
And I'm afraid that if we put a new board member as a superintendent evaluation, it's not about the superintendent, it's about the district.
But I guess I'm not really understanding the narrative.
Oh,
Apparently. I don't think I am, unfortunately.
So, do you remember last year where we kind of typed things up and then we gave them to like the chair and then supposedly that then made to the superintendent?
Oh, I see. So it
So-
would be, okay.
But this Todd, something that Todd recommended, and I want to say I really liked, and I don't want to, I assume Amy did too, is that compiling together the document we give to Todd is done as a board as opposed to
Oh,
the
absolutely.
chair.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Okay. So we would need to then have his evaluation, some evaluation first before we do the narrative, or at least at some level, before we finalize that document. Right?
His narrative.
Yeah. Or no, his self-evaluation, or whatever we're calling it, right?
I guess there can be two components here. I mean, a self-reflection on the front end and say, here's how I'm thinking about my performance on these 10 things, and provide that to you. If that helps you get some structure around what you're doing, then you draft it, and then I can then do a more self-evaluation after the fact. It's like, oh, how do I feel? So it doesn't have to be like, they can be two distinct things. So if my writing a reflection at this point will facilitate your ability to write some kind of narrative evaluation of me, I'm happy to do it. I do think in terms of bringing the whole process to closure, it might be helpful for me to see what you've come up with, and then I respond again after I've done that. So there's more precise.
So maybe we think about it as a midpoint. We're doing a midpoint review of him to be used later, reviewed with him and used later by a future board to, like we'd make a recommendation as a board.
Yes. Yeah.
So it would be a midpoint evaluation with recommendation, sort of.
Yes.
So are we talking about doing superintendent's annual review right now, or we're talking about just doing like a growth check-in? It's like hey, how are things going right now?
I don't feel like we can do the annual review because the year's not over, but Andrew brings a great point. In June, you're going to need something. Like, it'd be good to have something from a midpoint check-in to say, this is where he's done well, this is where he hasn't done
Well, we're
well.
trying to adjust the cycle is what I heard.
So, yeah, I'm sorry.
Two things.
You want, okay. I think this should be closure. That this is what we're going to count as the year.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, and then
decision about contract and all that.
I think we separate, what I saw in this document was a separation of the decision on the contract from the evaluation. It's like there's three distinct things that's on here. This evaluation, maybe longer than this evaluation, assessment of like, hey, like community voices involved in like, do we want to extend a longer contract?
I see what you're doing by tying it to the board cycle, but it's weird because it doesn't tie to his job, your job cycle in some ways, because your work ends in June, and we could say you're fantastic, and then I guess it'd be like a midpoint in June.
I guess where we kept coming back to is like, I mean, just let me say up front, I hope everything works out wonderfully and there's a continuous cycle. So it is. But that being said, as we learned last fall, there's a time for everything. So if you're going to make a transition, the best time to do it is to make that decision by August, so the process can then be put in place. So for this time around, it's kind of essential to think of a different time window. When you get into a cycle of things and it's a multi-year commitment, then the success of the board and the superintendent kind of go hand in hand. And so if we get into a cycle where March, April is the time that the board is setting its goals, that seems to be a logical time that the superintendent is setting their goals, so that they're mirroring each other. Whether or not there's a mid-year, like by August every year, there's like a mid-year check-in, because obviously you have to make a decision when contract expires. Are we going to continue this?
Yeah.
But so basically trying to get us to a point where that's happening and we're set up to do it, and we're not inventing a process every time it comes around.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
That's where I was sticking, right? Is
Yeah.
that point? Yeah,
And
right.
I asked specifically about that because for me, the school year was always August, June, and Todd had pointed out really his job is really March to February because it's a cycle with the budget as well as the board. And I can get a better job explaining than I am right now. And it's also kind of nice because it's tying the school years together and it's creating that process. But I think otherwise we end up doing it.
I was just gonna say, so I think we need to, one, agree on the time frame before we do anything, right? I mean, are we gonna do it before the new board?
No, I think it all makes sense. I think the sticking point for me was the whole June thing, and I think this particular year is just going to be odd. It's going to be weird, right? Because we're not going to have a full year of this new process.
Yeah, any change is going to have like.
Oh yeah, absolutely. No, absolutely.
Like, much like Jen was talking about the numbers.
No, absolutely. It's just that the people in June are going to have.
I think if we don't shift the cycle to align closer to the board, we will constantly end up with like a missing quarter of like waiting for the board to set its goal and like then.
I think it's a great idea. Absolutely. Yeah.
So, to my understanding, that Todd should bring some sort of the beginning of self-narrative to the board on our next meeting, correct? And then, do we then want to sit down as a board that night as well in non-public to hash one out to give to Todd? Or do we want a separate meeting to either have more frank
It's going to be hard, I think, to take like a self-evaluation, self-assessment written, read it that night, and then come up with like a coherent conversation to advance that
I
dialogue.
think it should be an asynchronous process where people submit their feedback, someone aggregates it into a semi-coherent narrative, and then we review that at the following meeting.
Because ultimately, right, like it's the board evaluating, not 5 individuals.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's,
Yeah.
yeah, I like that.
So do we want to do a separate meeting the first week of March?
I mean, can we do it around the school board meeting? Isn't there a meeting?
Yeah, that'll be March.
Second.
Second.
No, that's the vacation week.
Oh,
Yeah, we moved it.
Yeah.
It's the week after that.
The ninth.
So.
It's the 9th, you're right.
I don't know, Jason, now they're okay. Rand, it would be a non-public without Todd, because we
Yeah.
evaluation.
Right.
Are you guys planning on going?
Yes.
Okay, well,
Bear.
I can certainly zoom in from where I'll be.
Yeah, March 9th is the next meeting, and that would be the last one before the seating of the new board.
Just,
Oh, it is?
and
That
I,
would give time for, I'm sorry.
yeah.
Is that-
Well, just an
Oh,
idea.
excuse me, February 16th is the next meeting, but March 9th is the March meeting. Sorry, apologize.
I think we should make that non-public for after February 16th, and here's why. What we get from Todd and what we all submit to an individual to be named later to collate, if we sit down and we realize, well, gee, we pretty much agree on everything, which is a possibility among many, then it becomes a fairly short discussion. So I would like to allow us the opportunity to be pleasantly surprised, and then whereas if we find that there's significant gaps, well, okay, it's going to take longer, but we at least should allow the possibility that it happens quick.
Or that if we need more time.
Yeah.
The only issue I have is making sure that you feel that you can get something to us by.
Well, I can definitely give you something. Yeah.
I mean, honestly, tell us.
No, my thought is, I mean, I'm looking at it right now, and I'm not stressing about it. I think I could easily, write a couple of paragraphs about each of the 10 criterion you have there, and give that to you with some examples of things that I think have been focal points, and then hand it off to you.
Because we're going to need that for a few days a week to then generate some kind of. So yeah, you're looking at the week of the 20th to have some sort of meeting, or on the weekend. I really don't want your mind. But
I'm out of state on the 16th.
yeah, but I don't think it would be the 16th. I think we would get something from Todd on the 16th.
But I know, but if we met after.
Yeah, we would be able to have a non-public that night anyways, because we need to take that information, go home and draft something up and send it to a common person.
Yeah, but that's what Dan was saying, the opposite, to meet after that.
But
Yeah, sorry, what I thought I heard was that between now and the 16th, that we would each just write something out in terms of what we're thinking and submit it to one of the 5 of us to.
oh, without the goal, without his, I thought we were going to take something into that conversation.
All right.
True, we don't.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've heard both ideas floated, and
You're not gonna be here the 16th. But he could submit it,
I could submit it right
Yeah.
very easily.
yeah.
right,
But yeah, I think we all would have to before that. So anyway, so
yeah, so.
we just have to have another meeting.
Yeah.
You're not going to be away the following week. I think you're waiting to drop something.
No, the 16th is the day I told you about.
Oh, that's right. Well, that's 2 of you.
Do I have a quorum issue?
No.
Okay. Do you want to do it the second?
The second is the school vacation.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
it needs to be
it's-
either he's gone the week of the 13th. Yeah. So it'd have to be the week of the 20th sometime. Or when are you back? Saturday. Saturday. What's the one on the right? Saturday. A little after what? So I go through my whole day. So does anyone? Well, should we wait till we're closer to the week of the 20th? And just plan on setting up a meeting early in that week or whenever.
Works for me.
Do it now. I don't care.
I'd rather just plan it now.
All right. What? So this time maybe 5:15 or something.
Yeah. Is 5:15 okay?
Yeah.
5:07.
On the
5:07.
21st or the 22nd? It doesn't matter to me, I'm good.
When's the house?
This is 23rd.
Yep.
What time do you guys meet for the policy?
4. And I have to leave after that.
Okay.
Did you say 21st or 22nd?
The 21st or 22nd?
What, you want President Day off?
Yeah,
All right.
I do, I want to celebrate our presidents.
Either of those 2 days is fine
Either
with
works
me.
for me.
I'm only kidding, I can do the 20th too.
Any of that right now. So, President.
So I can do it any day that, I can do it any day that week. Any day means 4 o'clock or later.
As can I.
That's can I. Dan, you
Yeah, I'm 21st, 22nd, both fine.
I can move some stuff for either.
23rd? Oh, you're going 23rd works, right?
23rd school policy.
Well, you'll already be here.
He has somewhere to go in there.
No, I don't.
Oh, I thought you said that.
Oh, it's 12:30.
Well, no, yeah, I usually have to pick up the. I guess we can do the 21st.
5:30?
Sure.
Do we have to,
Yes. Have a public meeting, yeah.
and then call, okay.
So it's
Sorry.
posted and everything.
I'm
Yeah.
part psychic, sorry about that.
And,
Yeah, it had to be posted.
What time are we doing?
5:30.
And that's the 21st, you said?
Correct.
I'll have Patty post it.
Awesome. Moving right along, we're almost out of our presentation section.
And actually, this last one I'll keep really short because
Yeah,
you
please.
have you have the PowerPoint that I put together for use at the deliberative session, and nothing in it should be of any surprise to any of you. Having not been through it in Newmarket before, I just wanted to make sure you knew what I was planning to share. So,
May I make one suggestion,
Sure.
which again, you're totally free to use or not use? So I think at all the deliberative sessions, there'll be a stack of handouts at the door that'll have the warrant, as well as the moderator will read the warrant. I don't know that I'd put the text of the warrant article on your slides.
Yeah.
If I had sort of one reaction to this, it felt a little like we're burying the lead a bit here, because my point of view is always come with your strongest point first.
Yep.
And your strongest point is, hey, we're holding the expenditure budget to a 3.9% increase in an 8% inflation environment. And that's getting somewhat masked by the fact that we did such a stellar good job of offsetting the tax rate with revenues this year. I guess that was my thought in reading this, is lead with that and then come with the supporting detail behind it.
well, certainly if you pull the warrant article language out, you can shorten the PowerPoint by at least 7 slides.
Yeah, I mean, you're certainly going to need to have something about, like, so, probably
I guess
Form an Article 5, you're going to have to say, like,
Listed there.
Yeah.
you know,
Yep.
something about it.
I can absolutely, I can play around with it. If that's what people would like, that's easy. I was trying to some extent, I was mirroring what Steve Fournier was doing with the town.
Yeah, the format looks familiar to me, probably because the town building.
I mean, I just, again, everyone will get a copy of the warrant at the door who wants one, and the moderator will read the articles as the town meeting votes to move them or not move them to the warrant. So
That's fine. Yep, that sounds reasonable to me. I can easily do that.
Fantastic.
All right.
We are out of presentation. All right, at 6:38, open floor public comment. Seeing no one.
You're jumping ahead. You got a whole section on discussions.
Public correspondence, I keep screwing that up. We need to change that. Because I confuse public correspondence and public comment. Excuse me, thank you very much. Does anyone have any public correspondence they'd like to?
I did get one piece of correspondence from a community member concerned about our cell phone policy at our junior senior high school, and feeling that we need to take a deep look at that.
Recommend our policy committee do that.
I think it's less about policy of the school board, and it's more about management procedures at the junior senior high. So we certainly can take a look at it at the policy level, but I think it's more coming up with some management practices around the navigating of the issue. And just for the record, nobody is arguing that we don't need to have some kind of look at our cell phone policies and practices at the high school. It's come up in pretty much every meeting I've had with teachers over the course of the year.
Was the correspondent pro cell phone or
I
anti cell phone?
felt that there was real legitimate concern for the social, emotional, mental health, well-being of our kids because they spend too much time focused on texting and Snapchatting and all those other things, and that maybe school should be a zone that is less inclined to that.
Blocks at the, I'm not joking. In some places out there, right? At the beginning of the classroom,
Yep.
drop your
Yep.
phone in here.
So with the last meeting, Mr. Superintendent, I brought out the comment in the student handbook with cell phones, and I think it might be a larger student handbook thing, and not necessarily policy, but I know discussion about updating that.
I would have to say one of the things I noted in my first day or two on the job, I've never seen so many no cell phone signs in any one school. So the message of not using them is clear. The regular enforcement and adherence to it is so I think there needs to be a discussion of okay, if we're going to manage these, what are we really going to do? It's one thing to have words in a handbook. It's another thing to say, are you actually living that? And is that actually happening? And I think that's where, yeah, that to me is the issue. It's not so much, I don't think we have to convince people of a need to do something different. It's just we have to agree on what that is and then do it across the system. So anyway, that was.
Sorry. And the other thing too about that is to make sure that the teachers are covered with insurance, so that if they are asked to put that phone on a tree or put it on a teacher's desk, that something happens to that phone is not the teacher's responsibility.
Yeah.
That is.
Yeah, I was thinking if you're gonna have somewhere, it's almost like you need it by the camera, so that if anything happens to the phone, you can go back and be like, hey,
Yeah.
so and so.
But again, not a policy really issue. It's a management issue that we just need to figure out what's our management practice for that. And I, yeah. So anyway, that was the one piece of correspondence I received.
Do you want to give an update on?
Yeah, actually, I think we've actually already touched upon it. Clearly, it was wonderful to see when we did the count afterwards. The 48 community members were present, which was great. We had 14 district staff and then another half a dozen teachers from the junior senior high that were part of it. So it was a very nice cross section of in multiple board members. Thank you all for being there. But it was a nice cross section. It did allow us to kind of lay out the initial thoughts that our teachers had created in terms of what they thought were the transferable skills. There was some great suggestions that the finance, as noted. It was interesting that, I think we did an activity where we presented sort of the general idea of what Vision of a Graduate is all about, why we're doing it, and then we had breakout groups that did some brainstorming, and so there were 12 different subgroups that were brainstorming, and I think 6 of them identified finance as one of the things that they would like to see more involved in our program. So I thought that was, not that we hadn't thought about doing more finance, but I think getting the sense that there's a community interest in that, I think it was new to many of our staff to hear that. So there were a number of those kind of issues raised. Probably the most positive thing that came from it, I think there was a general sense that there was a community spirit of what do we want for our schools, and I thought that was great. Kind of moving forward, the teacher committee that is running that, the next time they meet, which they haven't scheduled yet, but Andy and I and Patty are all going to be there, and they're going to take those sheets and we're going to kind of talk about, okay, now that we've got this input, where do we go from here? There will, in the very near future, be a survey for students to kind of get student input on it. There will be a community survey that will be done at some point in the near future, and then we're also going to broaden the staff survey to incorporate all of our staff district-wide to make sure we get all perspectives. And then from that, we hope to be able to craft together at least a preliminary draft. And as I promised, without giving a specific date, the April-May window is when we're going to do another event. We'll feed people. As Gary pointed out, Fresh Picks pizza was very well received, and it was nice to see that people enjoyed it and they did a nice job. We'll have another event, similarly feed people, share that draft at that point, take one more round of input, and then really hopefully have a teacher committee that will bring it to closure with the idea that by fall we would be coming to you with a document to get your blessing on it. And once we have a confirmed Vision of a Graduate, that would be a great thing for our community to focus all of our school improvement efforts. So anyway, that was sort of what we did. And I know so many of you were there, so if you have any thoughts or.
Well, I loved all the input. I thought that was, just for me, opened my brain to think, look a little deeper. Um, there was one thing, there was a gentleman who did not have a student in the district. And he commented on receiving information on these public school events. And I guess my question is how did we attempt to get the community, just not the parents,
Sure.
into that?
Well, as you know, Blackboard is the tool that we use to communicate with parents. The same message that went out on Blackboard went to Tim Kremens along with the invitation, and he put it on the Newmarket, Town of Newmarket website. So that was there. It went into the weekly newsletter that goes out to the town. I would say one of the things that that newsletter is so comprehensive. I don't know how many people saw it just because you have to read a lot of stuff to get to it. And then probably the thing that I think had probably the most impact was just putting the invite on social media, and it was a number of places. I like you, I was excited to hear some of the people who were there were not people who had current children in the district. I talked to a couple of grandparents. I talked to a number of community members, just like they were interested in it and they wanted to be there. And to me, that's the sign of okay, we're starting to cross those boundaries and make that happen. But Tim Kremen has been great in helping us promote stuff. But I do think we need to think about how we want to do that.
I mean, because I suggested when I was on the board, I personally think we use the Facebook page of the district. No comments allowed, turn those off, because I think you're going to get a lot more involvement from stakeholders that don't have students, and that's how it is.
Yep.
Facebook is, you can see everything you need to know about
Social
your
media platforms, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's,
Yep.
one of the things that we, was, it was mainly, I think, just from me knowing people in town, elementary school parents that were there, rather than representing the junior, senior high school. Do you think that was fair to say, or?
I certainly talked to a number of first, second, third grade parents, and some middle school age parents too. But yeah, there were.
Pull more of those, the other parents as well.
Well, one of the things we did do, which I was pleased with, the teacher committee, when we met to talk about it, we said, okay, let's create this flyer and then use your own various networks to kind of push it out to anybody you think to be there. So there was, as with social media, it's highly personalized, and so we just kind of said, okay, who are the people we want to kind of reach out to? Because obviously you want the general invite to go out to the whole community, but then you also want to make sure you have community business interests in the room. You want to have people that have a stake in the schools, and so there was a sort of an organic effort by our teachers to just push it out to whoever they could think of, and that may have been more how we got some of these people to come in.
Well, we could always reach out to the Newmarket Business Association as well.
I think they actually have a plan to do that. It's part of the vision, so.
I think that was great to involve the businesses in town, because they're great. That's a great idea.
Questions like that, as a parent, I'm really excited, but also as a teacher, I was really appreciative of how bottom up it seemed that everything was done collaboratively to the goal at the end. There were a number of other teachers in that gym, I don't know if you picked that, but quite a few of them came up to me afterwards and how much they wished their district was doing this, or that I think a couple of them said how they could get a job in this district, or I think they got to the point where my spouse said, if I need this job, just do it. So I hope you take that as a compliment.
I appreciate it.
Bring a stack of applications to the next one.
And I do want one of the most positive elements to that, to last night is prior to the event, our teachers were extremely nervous about the idea that they were presenting their preliminary thoughts on something, and they really didn't quite know what to expect. And just looking at the expressions on their face as we were doing the final share out, it was clear they felt much more comfortable. And in talking with them afterwards, they were actually kind of energized and inspired by it. So I thought that was good.
Awesome. Next up, actually, talking about the HR.
Yeah, and actually, this is just a quick item. As you guys know, Melissa Van Sickle took another job, a great job. She's taken position as finance director over in the Hudson school system, but it did leave a vacancy in our finance department. We have posted the position. Unfortunately, we have not been successful yet in filling it. In the budget for the 23-24, we have included HR consultant work to support our finance office around contracts and all that kind of stuff. Jana had the brilliant idea. Unfortunately, she's not here right now. Since we are not currently paying Melissa's position, if we could start the consultant work sooner, it would allow that. So the consultant is starting with us on Friday, tomorrow actually. It's a guy named Norm, I forget his last name, but I'm meeting him tomorrow. What he's going to be focusing on with us is trying to get all of our contract stuff in order, getting our job descriptions all in order, and supporting Jana in whatever way he can to sort of keep that office afloat. Because not only did Melissa leave, we've also had one staff member who was out for a period of time for a medical reason, and so we only have a staff of 4 to begin with, and so this consultant will very much help us. So I just wanted to let you know about it. You will see him in our office supporting us. With any luck, if it works out well this spring, he might be the same consultant we have on board all next year to help us with a number of other things.
Awesome. You and I talked, and apparently you some few snow day questions after that tiny sling snow days.
Yeah. No, I just wanted to kind of just quickly put on your radar. I mean, clearly by having snow days, it does present us with the question of, okay, making those days up. Right now, my expectation is that we've had 3 snow days, 2 actual snow days and 1 power loss day, that we would make those up in the week following the last day of school. The reason why I say the week following it, it's important that you know that the Monday following, our school is supposed to end on June 16th. The Monday following it is Juneteenth, which has been officially recognized as a national holiday, so we wouldn't have school on Monday, but we would then presumably have school on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, as that's what I'm assuming at this point. I do, however, want to remind you as a board that the minimum standards for attendance have been altered in recent years, and so there are 2 ways we can go about meeting minimum standard. One is through the traditional 180-day route, which is typically how Newmarket has done it. But there's also an hours standard that we can utilize. And with the hours standard, we have to, and again, these are minimums, not saying we should stop at minimums, but we have 990 hours at the junior senior high, 945 hours at the elementary level is considered minimum standard. The reason why I'm telling you this is we don't have to stick to the 180-day number if we reach that point and we have determined that it's a reasonable thing to do, is to maybe not do 180 days. That being said, I want you to be aware that the teacher contract calls for 186 work days. And so the challenge that we have flexibility on the academic side of the equation, the workday side of the equation, I think that would require some negotiation with the to sort that out. But one option we could consider is potentially maintaining the end date of June 16, but then having an additional 3 work days for teachers. And to be very honest, in talking with teachers around the district, there's some excitement at the idea of, gee, it would be great to have at least 1 day after school gets out to kind of bring closure to the year and so forth. So don't have to make any decisions tonight. I just want you to think about that we do have some flexibility. And obviously it's only February, and we don't know how many days we might end up having. So I just wanted to kind of put that on your radar, because the question I got the first snow day was, well, how are we going to make it up? And it's like, well, one day. And that's sort of the standard practice. So right now, that's what I'm assuming, but we can talk about it if that's something that you guys are interested in. The only way it would impact graduation is if our number of days prevented our seniors from meeting the minimum standard that's required for seniors. Seniors have to have 960 hours of instruction prior to their graduation. And if we get into a situation where we're not able to, that's where it would become an issue. It's not an issue right now at all. Just so you know, with the 180-day calendar, even with the the Wonderful Wednesday model that we have that's sort of, we're still scheduled to have 1,042 hours of instruction. So if you, again, I'm not a big fan of talking minimums, but the difference between state minimum standard on hours is 990. 1,042 is what we have. That's 52 more hours than is required. So again, we have some flexibility there that we can choose to use if we decide we want to do that.
Did you say 1,042?
Yes.
So that's 82 hours over, right?
Well, yeah. Well, 82 hours above seniors.
Right, so the seniors are covered.
Yeah, for seniors it would be.
Okay.
Yes. But again, typically seniors.
So we have to exceed our snow days probably, right? I mean, I forget, I can do the numbers.
I mean, basically, just to do the math for you, real. I mean, we are. If we had 6-hour days, which is typically what we have at the junior senior high, in order to get to 990, it's about 165 straight up days. So again, there's more flexibility in our local calendar decision making than maybe we've thought about using in the past. So when we get to late March, April, when it's clear how many days we've had, I'll come to you with a recommendation for what makes sense.
So we're nowhere near that. So
We're nowhere near
move
yet.
on. Move on. Thank you. Next up, the discussion is the budget mailer. We talked about doing the number, the increased dollar amount of the budget, doing a mailer to provide some community information. If we're going to do that, we should decide tonight if we'd like to.
Say increase, dollar amount? The mailer? Or did you say
No,
that?
I'm saying because of
Confused me.
what's the warrant's $3.09 increase. We were I had some concerns that maybe we
Okay.
need to inform the public more. Since then,
So it's
grown
$2,000,
less.
wasn't it 2,000 for the mailer?
Yeah, it's about $2,000 for that.
Since then, I've become less concerned, and we also did a pretty amazing video shoot while he did it. Been talking about the budget, and it's been viewed by over
1,000.
1,000. So I think the messaging has probably gotten out to anyone who's likely to attend.
We're gonna do another one too, right? Yeah, we got a follow up. Yeah.
Yeah, we cameos are welcome.
There's sitcoms on CBS that don't pull those numbers.
Exactly. So, does anyone think we can do a mailer?
It feels super controversial, you know, so like if there's some like major controversial item, or maybe just feel like there's overkill.
I think it's helped too that for all the newspapers in the area, what some other districts are proposing, that we are well under that. I think people read the newspapers for all the news. Yeah, because of those. They will see that this one is very conservative.
All right. So, hearing that, we will dismiss the mailer idea. Now, open the floor to public comment at 6:57 p.m. Seeing no one, we will close the floor at 6:57 p.m. Action items, seek a motion to approve January 19th public and non-public minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Dan, second by Phil. Does anyone have any discussion other than me?
The only thing I saw is, this is really ticky-tack, but on the first page, so the budget committee doesn't pass the warrant, they recommend or don't recommend. So it's the paragraph that starts with my name, the third line, I would just say that the budget committee recommended 6-3.
And I'd say,
So just take out recommend you want?
As opposed to saying which was passed 6-3, I would say which was recommended 6-3.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
we're an advisory body here.
Yes.
Gotcha.
So, as you included as two non-publics, but you only have one non-public one non-public motion in the public minutes, there should be two.
Okay.
And there should be the reconvene should occur in between those two, obviously. And then the adjournment is actually a little bit later than what you had because it was after the second at 7:16. We actually adjourned at 7:29.
It's because they're backwards. It's because the first one is the second set of minutes in the packet.
Yeah, they're back, yeah, wait a second.
But there one is missing in the public minutes.
Right, okay, I gotcha.
The minute,
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
back, yeah.
they're backwards in the packet, but
Right.
the minutes are accurate in terms of time. 7:28 adjournment. It's just that
The minute, the non-public times are correct.
Yeah.
The public
Well, you said seven.
recollection are incorrect.
yeah. No, I see.
Yeah,
Not recollection. Public noting of the non-publics are incorrect. So that was a change I had. There's the motion on the floor, second. Any further discussion? All in favor of accepting the minutes as revised, please say aye.
Aye.
Carries 5-0. Manifest, sir.
Make a motion to approve the manifest for the week of February 2nd, 2023, the amount of $787,527.47.
Motion, do we have a second?
second.
Ms. Tillman. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Passes. Donations. I don't see this.
And it was one donation from NCEP for $500 to go to a mindfulness corner in the counseling office.
Thank you very much. I seek a motion to accept the generous donation from CEP for the mindfulness. The mindfulness center. Any second?
I'll second.
Andrew, thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any personnel matters? No personnel matters. Moving right along. So this next item, I'll ask for a motion. We have discussed it previously. We can certainly discuss it during the discussion section more, and if needed, we can go into a non-public to get more information. But we have discussed it in non-public last meeting.
And if I could just as a follow-up, Principal Corman met with the family, had a conversation, feels confident that this is a situation that we can manage.
Awesome. I'd seek a motion to approve the manifest hardship that's been presented.
Second.
Second by Mr. Smith. Any further discussion?
No.
Hearing none. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
That's 5-0. Great. Thank you. I'd seek a motion to go into non-public session to discuss litigation matters that may be considered under RSA 91A3 2 lower e. Lowercase e.
So moved.
Second.
Second by Mr. Hooker. Thank you very much. By roll call vote, Dan Smith,
Aye.
Gary Swanson, aye. Amy Tilton,
Aye.
Andrew Hunker,
Aye.